All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Let's begin. So we are picking up in Os Chaf Hey. We began Os Chaf Hey yesterday, where Hatzaddik really began to develop this incredible idea regarding the dogs. He said, as opposed to the chamar, the donkey, which brays in the early part of the night when the master is still awake, so the dogs often reserve their barking for when people are asleep. The dogs are the second mishmar, which is mamish like the dead of the night, the middle of the night. People are asleep, the dogs are barking. So remember again, so Reb Tzaddik began to explain this idea. We're picking up on page Nun Ches, and let's start in the beginning of the left-hand paragraph. He said, I'm reading in Bi'urei Chasidus, I'm sorry. Left-hand paragraph, Bi'urei Chasidus, page Nun Ches. So just as the dog, if the dog tries to bark during the day, so ultimately his master or others will try to silence him. But when it's the dead of night and there's no one to disturb the dog's barking, so the dog barks at will. So Reb Tzaddik says this is a powerful metaphor for ruchnius, for spirituality. Dahainu b'tfila hanirmezes b'tzakas haklovim. Very often prayer is compared to barking of dogs. Just like the dog barks when it wants something, so Chazal often compare tefillah to the barking of the dog, right? The dog wants something, the dog barks as well. So he goes on, he says, Tov Yoser, sheyispalal ha'adam b'makom she'in sham b'nei adam. It's better for a person to daven, where other people are not found. Just like the dog is only able to bark unaffected if there's no one else around, so too again it is better for a person to be able to daven if there's no one else around as well. He goes on, he says, why? Because when there are people who are not serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the right way, they go that individual or when a person, what Reb Tzaddik is saying is like this, just like the dog, when he's around people who are quieting him, who are shushing him, who are stifling him, so it impedes his ability to bark at will. So sometimes when we want to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we're around people who are not supportive of that endeavor, and we are around people who are exerting, we'll call it a negative spiritual energy, it impedes our ability to properly serve the Ribono Shel Olam. He goes on, him in Babylon also as hamispal b'fnios lechavin b'tfilaso l'to'eles atzmo v'lo over ashchina v'himasichen as daito lachshov b'tfilaso machsheves chutz. Haynu chutz min hakavana haruya she'umid lifnei hamelech b'tfilah. So we'll say, so sometimes again, if I'm around just the wrong kind of influences, and by the way, the wrong kind of influences doesn't even have to be negative or bad things. It just means distracting things. That when I am distracted, when there's too much around me going on, by definition, my tefillah becomes distracted. Now, distracted tefillah, Reb Tzaddik says, can mean a variety of different things. Reb Tzaddik says, for example, he says, davening for yourself as opposed to davening for the purpose of connecting to the Shekhinah is distracted. Now, that's obviously a very high level, right? But then, perhaps more appropriately or more relatable, he says, sometimes when you get distracted, you just start thinking about other stuff during davening. I will say, no, doesn't it happen sometimes, unfortunately, that a person's davening, and ultimately, again, I find myself at a certain part of tefillah, and I ask myself that most profound question: how did I get here? How did I get here? Not like how did I get here, some type of esoteric, metaphysical, existential question, like how did I get here? I mean, like, how did I get to the end of Psukei de Zimra? I don't remember davening the first part of it. Or how exactly did I get to Modim? I don't really remember the brachas beforehand. Says Reb Tzaddik, sometimes when there's too much going on around me, the tefillah itself becomes distracted. He says, V'gam shar machshavas ba al yadam. He says, just again, the same way that the dog is able to bark unimpeded when there are not other people around, so too sometimes the best ruchnius, the best spirituality, or the best spiritual accomplishments are able to be accomplished when we are alone, when there's no one else around. He goes on, he says, Shalamona mischar b'meilav, mechevan sherov hamachshavos. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm in the middle of the left-hand column of the Biurei Chasidus, about 8 lines up from where it ends. So he quotes over here, Kimoshe Kasav B'Degel Machane Ephraim, Kama Pamim, Al Pasuk Shenemar, Al Kohen Gadosh Kishenichnas Lifnai V'Lifnim, B'Yom HaKippurim, V'Chol Adam Lo Yiyeh Ba'o Amoid, B'Va'o L'Chaper HaKodesh. So it's actually a very profound raya. So the Degel Machane Ephraim writes something truly beautiful. He explains that halacha l'maisa, a person, Pasuk says that when the Kohen Gadol goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim on Yom Kippur, v'chol adam lo yiyeh b'kodesh. No one else should be there when the Kohen Gadol is there. So what's the pshat? Right? What's the pshat? No one else should be there when the Kohen Gadol is there. So we'll say it's a very profound idea that sometimes, for the most elevated of spiritual experiences, you have to go at it alone. You have to go at it alone because sometimes other people, good people, but other people are a distraction. He goes on, he says, and what we learn from the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur is that when a person wants to truly serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with truth and with completion, azai tzarech lachshov v'ledamos bi'atzmo kiluhu ba'atzmo yechidi ba'olam. And we'll say sometimes to accomplish great things, you have to view yourself in that moment as if you are the only person standing there. There's no one else around. No one else around but me. And therefore, again, there are no distractions. No distractions from any person. Page Nuntes, Umikomakum. So I'll say, so therefore, again, this is the concept of Reb Tzaddik. This is the concept. Ultimately, again, this Yesod, we'll say if it does, you could also, if it doesn't work, you could just punch in the number also, I think, right, Jeremy? You could just, okay, good. So we'll say, so again, ultimately what you begin to see is that halacha l'maisa in the event, not in the event, but sometimes for a person to reach a maximum spiritual state, so a person has to be by themselves. No distractions, nothing else happening around me. But here Hatzaddik gives an important qualifier. He explains on page Nuntes, ומכל מקום בתפילה בציבור אין חוששים לזה שיבואו לו על ידם מחשבות ופניות זרות משום שאין הציבור גורמים לו פניות. So we'll say this doesn't apply to tefillah b'tzibur. This doesn't apply to tefillah b'tzibur, and this is incredibly important. When it comes to tefillah b'tzibur, that is not considered to be a distraction for the individual. כי כשגם הציבור מספללים בשעה זו יחד עמו, as in daiton shel hatzibur alav. Because we'll say this is actually very interesting. So even though we're saying that sometimes being with other people can be a distraction, it's not the case for tefillah b'tzibur. For tefillah b'tzibur, and a person davens as part of a kehillah, the presence of other individuals is not deemed to be a distraction. An incredible yesod. Why? Kishegam ke'atzibur mispalin b'shazu yachadimo as ein daitan shal hatzibur alav. V'chin mamela gam hu lo nigram lo lachshav aleim, or mamela daita eina musachas min tefillah. So I'll say this is actually an incredible yesod. His wording is that tefillah b'tzibur is not a distraction. Why? Because when I daven, so the tzibur, his lashon over here is the das of the tzibur is not on me. What does it mean? The das of the tzibur is not on me. What a strange thing to say. So I'll say perhaps what it means is like this: the whole yesod of tefillah b'tzibur is that you become one with the tzibur. You become one with the tzibur, right? A tzibur is not viewed as a number of disparate parts, but rather a tzibur ultimately again is viewed as one comprehensive entity. One complete and comprehensive entity. So therefore, says Reb Tzaddik, that's not considered to be a distraction. An incredible yesod. So, because again, you read this and you would think that Reb Tzaddik's logical conclusion was daven by yourself. Daven by yourself. Don't be distracted. You'll have the best davening ever. And the truth is, again, there are times when davening by yourself absolutely is sometimes the most profound tefillah. But of course, there's a halacha of tefillah b'tzibur. And the halacha of tefillah b'tzibur means that we daven as part of a minyan. But Lamaisa says Reb Tzaddik, the reason why tefillah b'tzibur is not an intrusion or not a distraction is because in da'at love. When I daven as part of a tzibur, it's not the pshat that their das. See, it's interesting. So either it could mean that the whole is reckoned as one, the collective becomes one, and when the collective becomes one, I don't view it as a bunch of people over here. We all become one collective entity. Or it could also mean that Lamaisa, Reb Tzaddik's yisod of people going ahead and being interfered by the presence of others is only when we're not all doing the same thing. If everybody's doing the same thing and everybody's working in the same direction, then by definition, that is not considered to be a distraction. All right, well, so we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up with this. So we have this incredible model from the dogs barking. The dogs bark most efficiently when they are alone. Sometimes the way to bark most efficiently, to have the most efficient and most powerful ruchnius is by yourself. When there's no distractions, nothing else holding you back. But says Reb Tzaddik very carefully, of course, this doesn't apply to Tefillah B'tzibur. How we also apply this to Talmud Torah, Meretz Hashem, we will see tomorrow. Shkach,